yes, people want to buy casks, and I know there are a lot of regulatory and other
There are regulatory concerns because you
around
can't
it.
sell a cask. My understanding is we're already sold our first cask.
Consumer behavior is changing, also leading to responsible drinking.
Well, sober curious is a trend, and in India as well, we're seeing it.
Indian brands are innovating more for Indian consumers now than they were doing for about, let's say, 5 to 6 years ago.
I do believe that there will be some amazing new liquids from across the country. Right now, we've just tapped a couple of our key distilleries.
Right.
One was Alvar for Godawan.
You go to Dublin, you cannot miss Guinness.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like each other's alter ego.
Yeah. So I'd love to go there someday. Yeah. So Impress is a need state.
Right.
Much larger in India than it is globally.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Sip by Sip with the Dram Club. I'm Swati, and in today's conversation, we are chatting with Ruchita Jaitly, the Chief Marketing Officer at Diageo India. And we are going to cover some of the very important and unanswered questions about what does it take to be the marketing head of an organization which has some iconic brands like Johnny Walker, Don Julio, Godawan, McDowell's, and more importantly, get into a little bit more understanding of what is really the purpose behind driving these brands. What do we think are really the changing consumer trends? Sober curious, responsible drinking, experiences, and how is it that content is going to play an important role and is playing an important role in the entire alco-bev space. And now over to Ruchira for a quick introduction. Ruchira, I think the context of this conversation is to talk to you a little bit about the trending alco-bev industry, of course. There's a lot happening in India, globally, and we're seeing quite a lot of paradigm shift from what the industry was, let's say maybe 5 to 6 years ago on various aspects. So I think the few touch points that we really want to understand, one is market, because you lead the marketing for Diageo India. And you are a key stakeholder in the entire Diageo atmosphere and everything. What is alco-bev marketing different? And because we'll also talk a little bit about your previous journey and how Diageo happened and everything. And so how do you feel the difference? What would be the future looking like? So before we deep dive into all of these conversations, I wanted to, for our viewers, for you to give you a little background about your journey, how did it start, some of your previous experiences, and then what's the work like at Diageo, everything.
So big sip of coffee.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, my journey actually was fairly conventional. Though I have to admit, my education background is interesting now in hindsight.
Right.
I did my undergrad in microbiology and biochemistry.
Okay.
And a large part of what you do is food and beverage.
Right.
You actually do something called food microbiology. You learn about techniques like fermentation.
Yes.
And then it was all theoretical. I mean, we read it and we were like, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
So kimchi is good, and that's how beer is brewed. And we actually did a visit to the beer factory. I think it was London Pilsner in those days.
Okay.
I was in Bombay. If I'm not mistaken, I may have gotten the name wrong.
Right.
The idea of seeing culture and its role in transforming simple ingredients into, something exciting. Which for us as undergrads, beer was a little exciting.
Right.
Untouchable, but exciting. That journey actually evolved into, I don't know, someday, twist of fate, landed up doing an MBA.
Right.
So I started my career with Unilever in India, Hindustan Lever in those days. And I did an equal amount of stints between the foods division and the home and personal care part.
Right.
Which in my training period, and again I was in a factory looking at ketchup and how does processed food survive, right? Again, so much of now when I look back in hindsight, my career's had a lot of food and beverage, or maybe I'm just open to it because of the studies I did.
Right.
And then I was working on brands like Clinic All Clear later, which is again, by the way, about bacteria, scalp, yeast, all of that stuff. So it's like weird. Moved to PepsiCo, where I was working on the foods and then beverages part, and then, did a brief stint with Nokia. Also did something which was entirely about my passion,
right,
which was trying to build products that could help address the micronutrient deficiencies that exist at the bottom of the pyramid.
Oh.
And it was a little bit like they say, a moonshot project. I'm very, very proud of the products that we created.
Right.
I don't think we could commercialize them to the point where they were large, viable business.
Right.
And I left before that.
Okay.
Moved to Nokia after, soon enough. But it's still something that I keep wondering whether I could go back to or do something positively there.
Right.
Diageo for me was happenstance. It started with a conversation with a friend, and they said, "So what are you doing? Why don't you just come on board?"
Right.
And this was in COVID. We'd just been through Delta, and I remember thinking it would be so much fun to work with friends, the people you like working with. And I met Hina, and like they say, the rest is pretty much what you know.
Right.
I like working, and you asked me about Diageo, what it's like and what's the culture. I love being at Diageo because of, well, if I were to put it, 3 big reasons I can think of. One is I've always thought that the leadership here was authentic, honest, and very, very driven by an aspiration of building a fantastic top performing business, which is lovely. It's always something that's inspiring.
Right.
And it was a goal. I came 3 years ago.
Right.
So almost. So it's been quite a journey really in that period itself for USL as an entity in India.
Right.
The second is Diageo. I know of Diageo and the fantastic brands that we've built globally.
Right.
So it is really a brand builder's paradise. Right?
Right.
It is all about the brands. It is all about emotions. We have no compunction about saying there is nothing functional that we promise. It's all about, where you're at, the occasions, the motivations.
Yeah.
And the heart of the organization's philosophy or the purpose is celebrating lives every day, everywhere. And think about it when you're in the middle of COVID.
Right.
And you're thinking of, what is life, so to speak.
Right.
I think for me, it was a very simple purpose that attracted me, and then the fact that it was about brands.
Right.
And the third reason that I always believe is very, very important for me in any organization that I work in is how values driven are we? I think at Diageo, the last couple of years, I have learned more about building purpose-led brands than I would have in the last 25.
Right.
Which says a lot, because it's not like I was in organizations that were not purpose-led, that didn't have very good goals and brands.
Right.
But I think when I was in those organizations, we worked with the right values and the purpose, but it wasn't like brand building had to be led through a purpose
centered
lens,
around that.
right? And that is a very unique way of looking at the role that brands can play in society.
Right.
And when I look back over whether it's Johnny Walker and its inclusion journey, the kind of work we did with Aravani just last year, whether I look at the McDowell's brand and the work they've done not just on connections but also on differently abled or hearing impaired, the creative that we've done. Royal Challenge, which advocated so many years ago for mixed gender cricket. So right now we have men and women's cricket.
Right.
We still don't have mixed gender. So if you look at it, it was really way ahead.
Right.
Or Smirnoff, or brands like Godawan. I think these are brands that... So Godawan is a luxury brand that talks about mindful luxury and very conscious consumption.
Right.
These are all concepts that are in their very essence very, very future forward.
Right.
And I think that that's the third reason why it was just such a compelling place to be. Sure. I also love what I do. I have to admit, I love it. I love working with some of the most creative minds in F&B, right? When you go and talk to people, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yes.
There's constant creativity in the way you look at expressions and you look at experiences.
Yes.
You look at how you come alive in that moment.
Right.
And you never stand still. The brand could be 200 years old, like Johnny Walker is, but still there is nothing about it that has stood still. Of course, keep walking.
Keep walking is
the ethos, but there is nothing about it that says and says this is it. Right? You're constantly finding new ways to talk and engage with consumers. So what's not to like?
No, I think that's a great I mean, Diageo is one of the loved places to work, not just in India, but globally as well. And yes, it does have iconic brands. I remember I was in Dublin in May. And you go to Dublin, you cannot miss Guinness.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like each other's alter ego.
Yeah.
And of course, the experience at the Guinness storehouse is, I mean, there are no words to pretty much describe
I mean,
the experience.
I haven't been, so I'd love to go there someday. Yeah.
But I was just kind of processing a lot of things that you said about your journey and your time at Diageo. And you said, so you've been in food, then you've been in personal care, then you've been in beverage, then you also did something at the bottom of the pyramid, which you talked about, with food and beverage, which you talked about. Then you did tech, which is Nokia, and then you are now with Diageo. So I think you could be a consumer behavior library on its own, understanding how see, because consumer behavior for every category is very different. You know, the way you might approach a shampoo versus the way you might approach a whiskey might be very, very different. You know, your consideration will be different. So, I think the other thing that you mentioned is at Diageo, there's nothing really functional that we're offering to people. A lot of it is aspirational, let's say, a state of being, so to say, not just really trying to functionally improve your life, but emotionally charging.
It talks to the larger human needs.
Yeah.
One for connections.
Yes.
The other one is also for, so we look at it through what's called a consumer occasions and a motivations framework.
Right.
It's a global framework. We had one round of it some time ago. We've now, overhauled that work to go far deeper.
Right.
In India, we actually did even more work on going into what are consumer occasions and motivations.
Right.
So some interesting facts, for example, connecting is still the single largest moment where consumers think of categories like ours. And by the way, we're talking about total beverage. We're not just talking about, whiskey or spirits. Non-alcoholic beverages are finding more and more traction across the spectrum.
Right.
And that's because people want to make the right choices. Premiumization is a given. I think you've heard enough about that in media. But repertoire and experimentation is going across. And it's with categories that people are either not familiar with or with rituals that are new, even in the categories that they're familiar with, like tequila, which used to be this shot thing, which people are now saying, no, I want to sip it.
Yes.
I'd love a spicy picante cocktail, etc., etc. So the third thing that I thought was also interesting was this whole normalization of alcohol. And I think it's a good sign. It's a sign of maturity where if your motivation is connecting, then the alcohol and the beverage in the moment's important.
Right.
But there's a larger need and a motivation that goes around it.
Yeah.
So I think the normalization of alcohol, the fact that it's not something where people want to overindulge in through the week. They'd rather step up to the experience.
Yes.
You could all be in the similar place, but with very different motivations. And those motivations, in a way, pretty much govern what you're going to be drinking, how much you're going to drink, what you're going to, do at the end of the evening, what your food options could be. So it's a real universe that opens up, and it talks to the heart of human behavior and consumption.
Right.
It's not something that is just about saying, you know what, there's alcohol and I'm old enough, etc. I think people are making very different choices.
Right.
And for us at Diageo, that's very, very good news. Because we are committed not only to promote moderation and the positive part of drinking responsibly, not drinking and driving. We have programs we run across the country. But equally it tells us that if people actually are drinking or engaging with alco-beverage or with other beverages, and they're doing it for experiences and taste, we can put out so many new propositions and innovations, right? It's not just about acha now, whiskey on the table.
Yeah.
It is actually going to be also the way you can sip that whiskey or the kind of finishes.
Right.
I love what we have done recently with McDowell's Single Malt in India because we took, first of all, malts. Entirely the raw material, all the barley was sourced from India. all of it was matured in Nasik and then finished in casks from nearby Dindori district. And that for me was really being confident about what we could put out, right, as a proposition. Because when you're putting it out, it's not something that you know is always going to turn out brilliantly, right? I mean, you can guess. It's a creator who has the vision. And then they've got to bring it all together, and we've got some real magician creators. So when they bring it together, and imagine we've just won a silver for that liquid globally. Right? This was launched 3 months ago. We're already getting that kind of recognition. Godavan's the other one. It's the darling today of not just the business, but I think of the entire community of people who are, let's say, the guys who know great liquids. And that's because not only is it about a story of conservation, a story of managing resources and sustainable production, but it's also a story of that can lead to just an excellent liquid that can win awards literally across almost every continent in the world where we've entered those, you know, where those awards exist. It's a fantastic story about what India can do to impact the world of innovation and liquids. We don't have to always follow just that playbook that's set. So whether it's the local sourcing, whether it's the conservation efforts that go behind the region and regenerating both afforestation, habitat for the bird Godavan, whether it is water, because we are certified as AWS, we are equally using renewables. I mean, one would think, okay, all of that's the do-good part. So it's okay if, people do give a lot of leeway, saying, if this is doing so much good, it's great, you know. But look at the liquid. Godavan 100 has just won every single big award. Godavan 1 and 2, which is what's available in the market for literally every single consumer, not a ghost apparition that comes in and moves out, is have also won awards at similar
platforms,
in
forums,
similar forums, and they've all won like goals, in their categories. So I think that's giving us as Diageo confidence that not only do we have the best global portfolio, and I would argue one of the best spirits portfolios globally, but in India also we're making our mark. So Godavan pretty much is the toast today of Diageo globally, which is fantastic for our team. Yeah, I think it was a very long response. So.
No, that's fine. I think, so of course, McDowell's launch, we were there, and we also got
and you saw some of that feedback, right?
Yes,
from some of your consumers.
And a lot of people at the community ended up ordering quite a lot of McDowell's after we did the launch event. And in all transparency, I think it is one of my personal favorite liquids also that is launched in recent times.
Oh, lovely.
I think the quality, when we went to the distillery, we saw the entire process, etc., everything. I think one of the things that really strikes me is, or it's maybe my hypothesis, and maybe you can clarify that better to me. I think Indian made liquids do better for the Indian consumers as compared to, I mean, I know it's trespassing against Scotch whiskey or your international brands, but do you think Indian brands are innovating more for Indian consumers now than they were doing for about, let's say, 5 to 6 years ago?
So here I have to say, you're an expert because you're so close to these clubs, this club of people who are passionate about great liquids, right? So I mean, I do meet consumers and we do see stuff, but I think what I spoke about earlier, repertoire and experimentation, I think that's much larger as an energy. That's colliding with the fact that we've now got a lot of pride and confidence in what comes out of India. iPhones are manufactured here. No one turns around and says, I don't want an iPhone manufactured in India. I want one only made in XYZ country. Right? It's the opposite. They're like, great. And I'm sure they'll be as good. Liquids also have some terroir, some provenance, have the ability to build some creativity in the way the proposition comes out. It can work across the flavor wheel versus talking to certain areas, and what we know is, let's say, okay, I know it'll be a smoky or slightly peaty, a peated whiskey coming from so-and-so place, right? So it gives you the ability to innovate and deliver really other sensorial experiences that we like. So you may be right that palates look for certain kinds of liquids, but equally, there is so much happening in terms of exploration of different liquids from international whiskies and scotch.
Yes.
That I would say overall, that's like the water level has risen. We're talking about the monsoons. So the water level has risen overall.
Right.
And with it, there's also this whole Indian pride.
Right.
And the fact that we don't think we're less, so I will give it a chance. Where earlier I'd be like, why would I even try an Indian whiskey?
Yeah.
I'm personally really excited by the kind of plans that Vikram has on innovation.
Right.
Because I do believe that there will be some amazing new liquids from across the country. Right now, we've just tapped a couple of our key distilleries.
Right.
One was Alwar for Godawan. There's the Nasik distillery for McDowell's. But if I were to look at it, we've got literally stuff across the country. And maybe it's a little inspired by the four corners of Scotland and the Johnny Walker story.
Yeah.
But I think it tells you that with the diversity that we have in climate, in what we're sourcing as material. By the way, grains, millets, different kinds of propositions that lead to liquids. So Vikram's been making my mouth water. He's been talking about stuff he can do with ragi, which tastes like really refined. I mean, the way he put it was refined tequila. Now I was like, really? How come I haven't tasted that?
Right.
So I think there's a lot that we can offer, and it will find its way into the Indian palate, because palates do, they evolve, but they do. There is something about a local palate and what people like. Yeah.
And I think earlier you mentioned a point about consumer behaviors changing also because of normalization of alcohol. I think personally, I think that's leading to a lot of experimentation.
Yes.
And at the same time, it's also leading to responsible drinking, because people are like, I will try good stuff, but I will stay, within the realms of
sober curious is a trend that's across the globe.
Yes.
And in India as well, we're seeing it. We're seeing it with younger, more educated consumers for whom the mystique of alcohol and brands is not like it was maybe 40 years ago, where it was, something that was seldom seen. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think as Diageo, we've publicly stated our position many, many times.
Right.
That we are not about endorsing overconsumption.
Yes.
But we are all about responsible consumption, enjoying what you do.
Right.
Because if it is about celebrating life, we want you to enjoy your moment and come back. Right?
That's true.
So I think it's a very welcome trend. I think that's why, if you look at some of the acquisitions and the work we're doing with ventures, our ventures team, and I'm not going to step into their territory here because they're a fantastic team that keep coming back with these jewels. But if you look at what the recent investment we've made into sober, that's really following that trend. On one end, there is Hapusha, which is looking at gin, and I love Hapusha and the now beverages portfolio. On the other hand, there is what we've done with Pistola, which is looking at agave spirits from India. Again, there's a difference in the taste and the texture, and we've got some of the best and the biggest global tequila brands.
That's true.
But it's always interesting to be able to see what can we do with agave spirits that can maybe put in some innovations, products, creativity. And then there's sober, which comes in with a completely different point of view.
Correct.
And I think sober is something that it's a lot of us, by the way, have it at home. We've tried it. I love my Tanqueray 0.0.
Right.
It's really my go-to on a lot of evenings.
Right.
When I want the sensorials of a nice gin and tonic, but I know I have to wake up in the morning for a workout. And I'd rather, and I want that balance in my life. So I think it's something that we're going to see more and more of. And what we've picked up, interestingly, in a lot of this work that we did, like I spoke about, the consumer needs scope, to put it very simply, is that for a lot of people, moderation or this trend on sober curious is about one. In an evening, I want to have 2 or 3 drinks. One of them may be non-alcoholic. Right? Another evening, I want to participate in that moment of connect or hang out with friends or partying with friends, I don't want to drink. I want to know there are options that are adult beverage options that I can enjoy. The third one is if I'm at home, I'm sitting down with family, sometimes I want to have something which is which is relaxed, which puts me in the mood to just sit back and maybe savor the moment or relax, refresh myself. But I don't always want alcohol.
Understood.
So it's very mature thinking. And I think it's also about going beyond the choice sets of I can only have, cola or a nimbu pani or a glass of water. Because it's talking the same thing. Experimentation, repertoire, different tastes. I have a feeling, and we've launched Guinness 0.0 in the UK. Is today the #1 alcoholic, non-alcoholic beer in on-trade.
Wow.
And it's because for a lot of people, I have a Guinness, I want to switch out, but I love the taste. And this gives me the taste and it's guilt-free. So it's these insights are really working. But they want a Guinness and they're paying a premium for it. This is not, a standard priced beer. So.
Ruchira, I think my next question is more about consumer touchpoints. Diageo has a whole host of brands, Indian as well as international brands, and we are now seeing more and more of those brands coming into India. Like Don Julio has recently come in, and I'm assuming other brands will also come in. So I think and some of them also end up talking to the same consumer or a similar profile consumer who may have the same share of wallet. So at a consumer touchpoint level, and not just experiences of course one aspect of it, on trade, how important is the aspect of storytelling? How as a organization you're able to build those differentiations so that consumer is also made aware, because a lot of decision of purchase happens in the store, even if you might have experienced something at a restaurant or a bar, or you might have attended an experience, so to say, but a lot of it happens in the store. So like how do you go about differentiating your brands from the others in those consumer touch points?
So super great question, right? And I'm sure you experience a lot of it when you have conversations in the club, when you're talking, because people want to know the story. They want to know the what behind it, not just the why. And the other one is they also want to know the how. So what goes into the process to get it there, right? I think two touch points that stand out for me, which is off-trade. Today in places like Gurgaon, off-trade has become, it's a fantastic place for consumers to explore browsable formats, and you're seeing more and more browsable formats across the country. And that's because people have realized that consumers want to be able to go and pick up, explore, look at a bottle, and then walk around the store and then make a decision. At that point, there is a renewed focus on talking about what's different about your brand. And remember, these spaces are very confined. A place like Bombay, it's small, Goa, similarly. So part of it's on the bottle, and we took IBCs off. What was it, about a year ago? In response to just saying, how do we make our packaging more sustainable and reduce our carbon emissions and carbon footprint, which meant there was another part of the storytelling that kind of went off, right? So we're finding that educating staff in store is turning out to be a very, very important part of this. And a lot of them are very keen to learn. And conversations with them are always really interesting. So they can tell you what's happening, what's new. In places like mansions or living liquids or in a tonic, you'll actually find a lot of people. And this is across the country, right? This is not just in Gurgaon. The second one is, like you said, on-trade. Here I'm going to talk about two things really. One is we do work to enhance storytelling with propositions that talk through. So if you look at the cocktail menu today, the kind of descriptors on the taste profiles, it's almost like someone's written some kind of prose or poetry. It's not just about,
the ingredients listed,
which earlier was pretty much what you saw. And it's a little like when you go back to about 20, 25 years ago. I still remember I was working on food at that point in time, and we were looking at some menus from the top tier restaurants in India in those days.
Right.
Most of them were 5 stars. To say how do they describe menu and food options so that we can take inspiration on how we build our flavors out.
Interesting.
Right? That's now come into beverages and cocktail serves. But equally, programs like World Class, which is what we run, it's a way of actually also building and giving back to the bartender community in a way where you appreciate not just their creativity and innovation, but you also work with them on enhancing and putting up a platform which talks about storytelling, it talks about engaging with consumers, it talks about, and the World Class program, so you will have one winner from India who will be competing very soon with Global. But you have a lot of people who actually go through this, who become finalists.
Right.
Recently, I was in Hyderabad. The entire marketing team was with me, and we were at a venue, and we chose to go to a venue where there was a world-class bartender who participated and made it to the finals.
Right.
And when you were engaging with him, he was looking at you and talking to you and saying, so what do you like? What are the flavors that you, So the same Don Julio tequila, which is a fantastic base for a whole range of cocktails, including just sipping it. Right? The same thing actually was transformed into whatever your palate was looking for. This is what you were eating or what you were in the mood for.
Right.
And it was a lovely evening where some people were in a high tempo mood. Some people not so much wanted to just connect and have conversations.
Yeah.
So I think the drinks that you choose very often are an important lubricant into that moment.
Right.
They also enhance your mood, like coffee does for me early in the morning. So it's all of this, when it comes together, makes for a very, very compelling storyline.
Right.
To your point on how do you differentiate, one versus the other, I think the ingredient, the provenance, and just the brand is really at the heart of that storytelling.
Right.
And consumers who want to know more about the brand, they will ask the bartender, they'll ask the off-trade salesman, they will actually go out and research stuff. More and more consumers are traveling to brand homes across the world, not just in India. So I think there's a whole explosion of just curiosity. Yeah. So this is a space that's going to be very exciting. And I know that we are going to come back with more ideas and propositions on this. So,
In today's age, content is king. Everything is about how many pieces of content can you put out. Like recently Wimbledon did about in 7 days 1,000 pieces of content apparently. So in this entire...
Or the Ambani wedding.
The Ambani wedding that's been going on for ages now. So how does content fit in the overall storytelling strategy, communication strategy with the consumers? Because a lot of information is also available online and people do end up searching for it, looking for it, trying to get recommendations. So how do you see content adding to the entire storytelling?
There's a lot of content actually that consumers create themselves.
Yes.
Right? Which we don't typically engage or we don't promote.
Right.
But it goes to show that there is a thirst for that content.
Right.
I think the other one that happens is there is also a whole... the access through digital has become ubiquitous. So earlier you looked at a pack or you saw a bottle and you walked up and you saw it. And now it's something that you can actually go into.
Right.
I find consumers today are using 2 or 3 ways to discover more. I still think on-trade and experiences is the first place where they engage with brands.
Understood.
And that's because experiences are still the biggest currency. It's still the biggest currency today for... It also gives you the bragging rights, the ability to impress. So impress as a need state in alco-bev is much larger in India than it is globally. And there's a reason for it, right? Because the more I know, the more my friends will flock to me and, they'll want to know about my opinion about stuff. So experiences are still the biggest currency. On-trade, therefore, is a place where I still discover the most.
Right.
I will try things on trade, and when I'm with friends in a certain mood, basis recommendations versus what I will choose on my own.
Understood.
The other one is the global Indian and travel. There's a lot more travel and discovery.
Right.
And not just globally, frankly, in India as well.
Right.
People are traveling to locations like never before. So suddenly people are seeing stuff that they did not see earlier. The third one is on, again, of course, digital and content. Now, the role of content in alco-bev has got a lot, it's intertwined with food and experiences.
Understood.
So, what was this food content explosion again about 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, where all of us are watching food shows like we had never seen stuff like this, right? It was like, wow, I mean, you can pull together these ingredients and that has now found its way into building an overall experience or an ambience.
Understood.
And in that, the beverage that you choose to have is important.
Right.
It could be sparkling water with a lime.
Right.
Or it could be, your favorite scotch that you sip. Or it could be a tequila cocktail made with local ingredients. But paying homage to what is a taste profile coming from, a spicy, chili, whatever.
Right.
So, all these various things. While that sounds fairly conventional, I think also for the more serious person, there's a lot more literature available. I don't know if you've seen that as well.
Yes.
Suddenly there's literature available about the origin and source and storytelling. And a lot of influencers have come of age. Where they're actually writing actively about trends, about food and about beverages. And particularly about alco-bev, which was always ignored.
Yes.
So I have a feeling that all of this adds up to a larger culture. Interestingly, content, the way we saw it earlier, movies, and that's actually not happening as much because people don't want canned situations, etc. They want stuff where they can explore why, when, what.
Right.
So if you recall, there was always James Bond and Shaken Not Stirred, etc., etc., etc. Or stirred, not shaken. I'm forgetting which one it was.
It's shaken
not stirred. Yeah.
Yes.
So it was. So there was that. But today you don't actually find those kind of iconic lines. It is something that finds its way into popular culture and those Instagrammable moments, and then you take it from there.
Yeah.
Social media and individuals sharing, not influencers. If you ask me, is the most exciting thing.
Okay.
You're as you're trawling through or you're
scrolling through or stalking
and trawling.
Okay.
Trawling is looking high level to see what's interesting and who's doing what.
Right.
But stalking is like actively going
to their profile and seeing where they are, what they're eating,
doing,
what they are drinking.
All of that. So all of that means that there are people and there are people who want to share.
Right.
Yeah, where they are, what they've eaten. It's not just the food now.
Yeah, it's
and
everything.
Alco-bev has taken over. That's the trend. Now that's about an individual just expressing themselves in the moment, right? That I had this amazing drink, or I'm sitting here on the beach and sipping a long, cold drink. And I'm really enjoying this moment. So every which way, I think the expressions, the modes of it, that has become much larger. Because there is, to be fair, there's a lot of mistrust today. In media, even in influencers, whether you're doing it because you have to believe that the influencer is authentic.
Yes,
they're coming from a place where they're more about helping you with the information rather than someone who's there to get the likes and the shares. So I think all of that's resulting in the individual. I mean, I know that this is very old time. Person of the year was you, but many years ago. But I really think that's endured.
Right. So we've gotten a lot of understanding of consumers, their behavior and everything. I think the one big thing that we really wanted to understand from you is this entire space, and we've talked a little bit about it before as well, the Indian Single Malt space. And the pride that India will produce as good products as the international, which it is doing. This space has become like, I remember when we started Ram Club in 2019, there was Paul John and Amrut. There were only 2 brands. And today I can just keep counting for the next 5 minutes. How many brands are there? There are 2 brands from your portfolio which are Indian malts. There are other MNCs also who've launched single malts. So how do you see this space evolving? Is it just a fad? Is it here to stay? Do you think it will also transcend to other, I mean, it's already like agave spirits are coming out. Do you think it will also transcend to other categories? just how do you wrap your head around this space?
So the first single malt actually was McDowell's, a small correction.
Yes.
Yeah. Early 90s,
90s,
McDowell's
yes.
put it out and it was too early. To the question that you have,
Right.
in those days, a single malt had to come from Scotland,
Right.
right? And that was it. Japanese single malt, I mean, what are you talking
Right.
about? While Japanese single malts did exist,
Yes.
but what are you talking about? So that was, I think, visionary. I believe it was a fantastic liquid. I don't remember tasting it then. Fast forward to today, the precursor to this trend was actually gin.
Right.
And gin, with the influences from across the country, gave you a taste of what palate and provenance could be. Now, one could argue that our gins really, as you know, they're easier. It's a slower. I mean, it's not as slow of a whole period of maturation.
Right.
The influences, etc., etc. But I think gins are what opened Indians' eyes up to the fact that this could be a great liquid. And then there was COVID, where people were experimenting a lot more.
Yes.
Because you couldn't get what you always had. And suddenly you were looking around and saying, are there different options? And when there were options, you tried it and you figured those options weren't bad. So lots of different things that came together. And then, like we spoke earlier, there's Indian pride, which is also something that I would argue in the early 90s was we were just coming out of our own, a little hibernation into, a liberalized India and influences. So we just gain confidence every decade, and we are now today in a place where we're really confident about what we can do as Indians.
Right.
If I pull all of that together, today the revolution that you're seeing with whiskey, a little bit of rum maybe,
Yes.
some agave spirits across some amount of, vodka, yes. But I think vodka is maybe a slightly different kind of a category. Wine at some point, but again, wine growing is difficult to manage. So if you look across,
and even some craft beer, certain
beer,
cities, of course, are doing great stuff in terms of craft beer.
Absolutely. So, and then look at the agricultural produce, because we are a country with a huge amount of agricultural produce and agri products. Agri processing has been a challenge for us.
Right.
So this is actually something that naturally leans into what is available, as an agricultural resource. So if I look at it from that point of view, all of this was bound to happen. Is this a fad? My sense is no, because a lot of these trends are enduring.
Right.
You spoke about palate and the taste, and the fact that you like McDowell's, it's one of your favorite new launches.
Yes.
I love McDowell's, but I love Godawan too as well. I like both of them.
Right.
We just launched a special version of Godawan
with Taj. Yes.
Fantastic. I drank that and I'm like Vikram. I said, really an expensive proposition. So, because that is also a very, very special liquid that he created, that the team created for the Taj. So, I think if I look at it, I don't think it's a fad. If anything, I see consumers and the growing affluence in India resulting in people looking for their own casks, their own finishes, for maybe putting down casks and keeping them in locations where they can, they can get their own kind of signature tastes and serves. I think we've just hit the tip of the iceberg, right? But I think what we need to be careful about is what goes into qualifying something as a quality alco-bev liquid.
Right.
And that, as we expand sectors, different bases, the reason we need to be careful about that is because we also want to promote what is really good quality.
Right.
And we want to take overall quality up. And I believe that that's where Diageo comes in. And we have an important role.
Right.
Because we can, by virtue of our knowledge globally, bring in really great process, techniques, appreciation of what we can do with agricultural inputs, processes, and liquids over here. And that, when it can happen, can really lead to and the
big
win-win.
unlocks.
And it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
It's a win for businesses that are investing into building out the right kind of products
Right.
and processes. But equally, it's a win for consumers
Yes.
who get to taste the best from across the globe,
Right.
coming from their own country, hopefully at more accessible prices as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a win-win. So I don't think it's a fad. I also think of certain parts of the country and channels where this hasn't even started.
Right.
You know, you're probably sitting at the top of the expert pyramid
Right.
and experimenting with a lot of stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of other people who are
Right.
just about entering this and tasting it for the first time.
That's
And admittedly for them, it's like a revelation.
That's true.
And then there's the rest of the world to conquer.
Yes. There were actually two things that particularly kind of struck a chord with me when you said. One is, of course, people who are sitting at the top of the pyramid. Yes, people want to buy casks. People want to invest in casks. Then we, as a community, also get a lot of, these inquiries on a pretty much daily basis now.
Wow.
Because a lot of Scottish distilleries have
Of
programs
course, they've
laid
always
out.
had that, yeah.
They've had that, but none of the Indian distilleries have for various reasons. So I think because there's so much pride and they've tried and seen, oh, this is good quality whiskey, I want to buy a cask of it and keep. So I think one question is in terms of, do you see that space evolving? And I know there are a lot of regulatory and other
There are regulatory concerns because you
around
can't
it.
sell a cask. You have to bottle it.
Yeah.
And then it has to be sold through
Through the
channels such that
channels.
it's duty paid.
Yes.
But my understanding is we've already sold our first cask for India.
Okay.
So, and of course, this was done as a pilot to see
Right.
that we could actually make it happen because it takes time.
Yes.
There is a process to it. We wanted to make sure that we can get that process in.
Right.
To your point, and I didn't know people are calling daily to ask about it, but think about how exciting that
Yes.
could be.
Yes.
All the finishes. And Indians with our weddings and our celebrations and our families and our friends and our extended connections. It's a great way of celebrating something and giving something that's unique.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think that this is something that you're going to see more of. I'm really excited with some of the plans that Vikram has.
Right.
We've got some beautiful liquids,
Okay.
not just in Nasik, but in Ponda, in
Goa. Yes.
in Alwar, where we're doing all kinds of stuff. So there is no dearth of really the kind of things that we
can be done.
pull together.
Right.
So I'm waiting for the day when I can go out and buy one. I think it's a little far away because I don't have enough people to gift it to yet, or that I want to give something like that. But it can be a truly bespoke proposition.
Yes.
And I know Vikram is doing work on it.
Right. And yes, I think we're now towards the end of our conversation. So we did touch upon some of the investments that Diageo has made in Indian origin brands. It started with Now, and then there was Pistola, and then now there's been Sober,
and
Coffeen as well. So in terms of investments, one is of course vetting the product first, which I'm sure you do. But apart from that, as an investment strategy, how do you look at investing into particular brands and products from one values perspective? And because their values need to be mirroring, or in some way there has to be an overlap with what Diageo thinks overall. And second is from a growth perspective, like, is it only the emerging trends where Diageo is going to invest, or is it not necessarily?
So, two things, and I'll answer the second question first. I think it's about enduring competencies and expertise that we can build.
Right.
And where we see that there is a future for expansion. Right. So, not for emerging as much, emerging and enduring is the way I'd put it.
Okay.
And we got in with Now quite early.
Yes.
Not actually, and there also it was a very choiceful one. So then I come back to the first question, because at the end of the day, it's about the founders. These are all minor stakes, right? The majority of the stake is either with the founder or with whoever the investors are. And these stakes are designed for us to be able to partner with the founder and see if we can push out a growth strategy,
Right.
which is compelling, which is exciting, which can deliver some fantastic consumer experiences,
Right.
and add back to our portfolio in a way that's meaningful. For that, you need to have a partner with whom your values are synchronous, with whose vision
Yes.
you can buy into, whose way of doing business is the right way.
Yeah.
Who's also sees the value added by Diageo, not just in terms of an investor,
Right.
but also as a partner, equally, right?
Right.
It's both ways. I think our ventures team does a fantastic job of literally going through a whole gamut of such possibilities before they narrow in. Whether it was gin, which is still, by the way, growing really fast.
Yes.
I know it's really small, etc., but it's still one of the fastest growing liquids today. Whether it's agave spirits, which are just about taking off.
Yes.
Sober curious is a trend. Now caffeine, which is
Coffee
liquids,
liqueur,
which is a coffee liqueur. Plus also, I think there are lots of substitutes which people were using as stimulants. So if it's something that could be a more natural way of delivering that in a way that's enjoyable, why not, right? Because coffee is becoming a big culture in the country.
Yes.
So there are different things that they look at, and I'm not going to second guess what they go through, because I'm sure in each case there's a very large and a very stringent list of things that they go through.
Yeah.
But I think the larger one is, are these both emergent and enduring? Are these things where both of us can partner to create more, larger, bigger, magical, better consumer experiences?
Right.
And the third one is it something where the two businesses can align to create a portfolio that really builds the best out of India? I think it also signals Diageo's interest in investing in the country and in entrepreneurs and building a strong entrepreneur, a strong class of entrepreneurs from India in the alco-bev industry. So it's not just about importing stuff and putting it here. It's actually about saying, can we also give back and build something? It's foundational. Our facilities in Goa have got the capability of a lot of collaboration. With small batches, stuff that we can do with some packaging, etc. And that the idea is that we can then work with a lot of these entrepreneurs,
a lot of local brands,
and help them take these propositions into market, put out more experimentation, learn about what boundaries we can push. And we think the entrepreneurial energy in India is very exciting too.
That's
right?
True.
When you talk to them, we've spent that evening. I think I'm not sure if you were there. There was this evening in Goa where Hina had hosted entrepreneurs from Goa.
No,
this is many years ago. And at that point in time, I still remember being struck by the conversations, the energy, the excitement, and what they believe they can add back into what's otherwise seen as a fairly conservative alco-bev industry construct, right? So I think shaking things up is always a good idea.
Ruchira, I think we've had a lot of understanding or in-depth understanding of what Diageo is thinking, how do they perceive India to be a growing market. I think for my last question, I just wanted to ask you on a lighter note. Because you've worked with so many iconic brands in the past as well, some new age brands, and it doesn't necessarily have to be from any particular category, that really excite you in terms of what they're doing, what their storytelling is, or maybe their product's really good, like 2-3 brands that are new age, and maybe one brand apart from Johnnie Walker which has stood the test of time and still continues to stay relevant with the Indian consumer.
Okay. So personally, I am gravitating to brands that look at really an end-to-end sustainable growth journey. Personally. I think I'm more and more trying to look for those kind of choices. And it's not about being expensive. It's about really having a story that, because I believe that climate action is something that we all have to own individually. It's our individual actions. So my all-time favorite brand that I talk about is Patagonia. And it's a brand that I can't really, I don't buy at the drop of a hat. But when I buy it, it's something that I believe deeply resonates with the values I have.
Right.
Another brand I've always admired is IKEA.
Okay.
Because it designs not just for sustainability, but it also designs for just price points consumer.
Yeah.
And it's innovation and design driven thinking,
Right.
which is also something that's really, and it's not something you always see. Going into an IKEA store is like going to a candy store for me. I keep looking at these options, and it's stuff that I don't need. I'm not going to buy.
Right.
Just what walkthrough is,
Yeah.
to come up with a potato peeler or something like that. But so those are some brands that I think have stayed with me for a long time. If I look at it at an Indian brand, I'm going to go back to my first employer and say Dove and the kind of messaging that it has done over years.
Right.
It started out with, is it love? No, it's Dove.
Right.
All those years ago, right? And I know you share a common background from
HVL,
all those
yes.
years back to something that talks such purpose.
Yes.
But it's equally about the product and the product at its heart.
Yes.
So I think it's a brand that has really, really grown in my own estimation. And these are just external, not a Diageo brand. Of the Diageo stable, there are many. And it's like saying, how do I...
Pick your favorite baby.
Yeah, a little like that. Though I have to say Guinness it's not available in India.
Right.
But as a brand, has done so much to build this iconicity behind the ritual. Even the fact that the pour is the classic pour.
Yeah.
And you stand in a place where it's on tap and someone's serving it to you, and then they make you wait. And you're looking at it.
Yeah.
And it's this whole ritual around it.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
And it's about really enjoying the moment rather than, anything else. So, it's one of my favorite brands.
Yes.
Johnny Walker and Keep Walking continues to inspire me in a lot of ways. And right now, of course, I think Don Julio and Tequila is gorgeous. But the one that I get the most ahas for when I tell the story and I'm most proud of is Godawan.
Right.
I think that story is born in India, created in India by a team. By the way, I was not part of the business when it was being conceptualized. So this is full kudos to the team that conceptualized it. And today, I think with Godawan, we're not doing stuff recklessly. We're doing stuff mindfully with a very conscious consumption approach.
Right.
And one that's about sustainability and about preserving the rare, but equally for you to be able to taste something that is truly, truly rare and delightful.
Right.
So I think that's the approach, and that approach of mindful luxury, mindful consumption is just, it's fantastic. I think it doesn't again talk about consumption for the heck of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it talks about the deeper and such fantastic elements.
Yeah. And you have to savor it.
And you have to savor it. And savor, share. Everyone I have gifted a Godawan to, my friends, anyone who's come over and had it, they've loved it. Right? And they're so proud that we're building such a fantastic whiskey with a purpose out of India. So, yeah.
But thank you so much, Ruchira.
No, thank you.
I hope...
I don't know how much time I've taken.
No, we're more than happy if you take more time as well. We're just wanting to not step for your meeting. Yeah. But thank you so much for taking out the time.
Not
I think this was a very interesting conversation. Very, very diverse perspectives. We got to know a lot of things that we wouldn't think of otherwise. It always helps to get those perspectives for our viewers, because for them at the end of the day, it's okay, this is the cocktail, or this is the bottle that I'm buying and this is the story. But what really goes behind it, what are the fundamental values? I think that thanks for sharing all of that with us.
It was a great conversation. I hope you've got what you want.
Yes, I did. A lot of it.
There was a lot. You really have a way of pulling out a lot of stuff.
No, I meant we got a lot of what we wanted to. So that's a good thing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.